Chosen ones, March 28th. Just like Enoch, God will remove you to reveal who you really were. Someone looked at you and did not see you. I am not talking about a stranger on the street. I am talking about someone who knows your name, who knows your story, who should recognize your value. This person looked directly into your eyes and seemed to see right through you as if you were transparent, as if you no longer existed. And that hurt in a way you could not explain to anyone. Because how do you explain the pain of being invisible to those who should see you? But I need to tell you something now before anything else. This invisibility is not what you think. What is happening to you is not rejection. What is happening to you is what happened to Enoch. And if you do not know what happened to Enoch, stay with me until the end of this video, because this story will rewrite everything you believe about the moment you are living. I know you have been feeling strange things in recent months, things you cannot put into words. That group of friends that was once your refuge suddenly seems too tight. That job that once gave you security now suffocates you. That routine that once worked now feels like a garment that has shrunk and no longer fits your body. And that is not the worst part. The worst part is that no one around you seems to notice what is happening inside you. You try to speak, and the words come out weightless. You try to explain, and people's eyes glaze over, as if you were speaking in a language they do not comprehend. And then you begin to wonder, am I going mad? Am I losing connection with reality? Is there something wrong with me? No, there is nothing wrong with you. There is something extraordinary happening to you, and that is exactly what I am going to prove to you now. The Bible dedicates only 3 verses to Enoch in the book of Genesis. 3 verses for one of the most impressive events in all of human history. And do you know what those verses say? They say that Enoch walked with God, and that afterwards he simply was no more because God took him. Read it again. He did not die. He was not destroyed. He did not disappear by accident. He simply ceased to be found in the place where everyone expected him to be. The people who knew Enoch woke up one day and he was no longer there. Imagine the confusion. Imagine the neighbors asking, "Where is Enoch?" Imagine the family searching. Imagine the friends trying to understand. He vanished, evaporated. He left an empty space where he was once present, and no one understood what happened. But God knew. God knew from the beginning that that man did not belong to that setting, that the earth was not his final address, that the invisibility he experienced in his final days among men was not the end of his story, but the beginning of his true identity. And that is exactly what is happening to you. You are being removed, not destroyed, removed, repositioned, translated. And the difference between these words is the difference between despair and purpose. Subscribe to this channel now and activate the notification bell, because what I am going to reveal to you in the next few minutes is not something you find just anywhere. It is a message that was prepared for this specific moment in your life, and if you leave now, you will miss exactly the missing piece for the puzzle to make sense. Let us understand what happens when God decides to move someone, because it is not a random process. It is not God playing with chess pieces. It is a surgical, methodical process, and often painful for the one being moved. The first stage is the uncoupling. Researchers from the Department of Social Psychology at USP identified a phenomenon they call relational desynchronization. It is when a person, for reasons they themselves cannot articulate, begins to feel misaligned with the environments that were once natural to them. A fight does not occur. A traumatic event does not occur. Simply the rhythm changes. The frequency changes. It is as if you were listening to a song you always liked, but suddenly you realize the melody no longer matches what is happening inside you. And then the discomfort begins. And then the isolation begins. And then the unanswered questions begin. But what science calls desynchronization, the spiritual calls separation for purpose. In the Hebrew tradition, there is the word nazir, which at its root means separated, consecrated, set apart. The Nazirite was not someone rejected. He was someone so valuable that he needed to be extracted from the common so as not to be contaminated by mediocrity. And here is the point that changes everything. You were not pushed away because you have no value. You were pushed away because you have too much value to remain where you were. I want you to think about your life as it was 6 months ago. Think about the conversations you had. Think about the subjects that occupied your mind. Think about the priorities that guided your decisions. Now compare it to today. Something changed, didn't it? Those conversations that once held you for hours now seem shallow. Those subjects that once consumed you now seem irrelevant. Those priorities that once seemed urgent now seem small in the face of something greater pulsing inside you, something you still cannot define but that you feel with an almost physical clarity. This is not depression. This is not an existential crisis. This is the second stage of the process, internal reconstruction. Data from the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE, show that among Brazilians over 35 years old, there is a growing phenomenon that sociologists are calling the second search for meaning. Unlike the 20-year-old crisis, which is driven by insecurity and social comparison, this second search is driven by depth. The person has already built things, already proven things, already conquered things. But a moment comes when everything that was conquered seems insufficient, not because it is little, but because the spirit asks for more, not more things, more substance, more truth, more God. And when this internal calling begins, the external world stops making sense. It is like trying to feed an adult with baby food. The body rejects it, not because the food is bad, but because the organism needs something else. And it is precisely at this moment that isolation intensifies. Because the people around you are still eating baby food, they are still operating on the old frequency. And when you try to share what you are feeling, they look at you with that expression of someone who does not understand. Some distance themselves, others question you, others try to pull you back to the place where you were. And every attempt to be pulled back hurts, because your spirit knows that that place is no longer yours. And that is when the loneliness tightens. That is when the lie whispers, you are being left alone because no one wants you. But the truth, the deep, immutable and sacred truth, is that you are being left alone because God is preparing you for a company that the old setting could not accommodate. Like this video now. If you recognized yourself in any of these words, if something inside you answered yes while I spoke, leave your like. This simple gesture helps this message reach other people who are living exactly what you are living, and who perhaps are more lost than you. Now I need to tell you about the third stage, and this is the most misunderstood of all, divine silence during the transition. Because while God moves you, He frequently remains silent. Not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of trust. It is like the surgeon who does not talk to the patient during the operation. It is not because he does not care, it is because he is concentrated on something too delicate to be interrupted. Enoch walked with God. The biblical text uses this expression deliberately. It does not say that Enoch ran with God. It does not say that Enoch flew with God. It says he walked. And walking is an act of constant rhythm, of step after step, of persistence without spectacle. Enoch's walk lasted 300 years. 300 years of silent steps, of faithfulness without spotlights, of intimacy without an audience. And during those 300 years, the text records no spectacular miracle. No parting of the sea, no fire falling from heaven, no crowd applauding, only walking, only communion. Only the sound of two pairs of steps, one human and one divine, echoing on a path that no one else saw. And this is the part that hurts you most at this moment. It is not the pain of being removed, it is the pain of being removed in silence, without explanation, without a script, without visible guarantees that this displacement will lead somewhere. You wanted at least a sign, a dream, a confirmation, an angel appearing at the bedroom door saying, "Hold on, it won't be long." But what you receive is silence. And silence, for those accustomed to measuring God's love by the quantity of visible answers, seems like the cruelest thing in the world. But there is a profound neuroscientific reason for this silence. Researchers from UNIFESP, in studies on neuroplasticity in adults, demonstrated that the human brain performs its most significant restructurings in periods of low external stimulation. When the surrounding environment becomes silent, when stimuli decrease, when the agitation ceases, the brain enters a state that neuroscientists call the default mode, a mode in which neural networks reorganize, new connections form, and old patterns are dissolved. In simple terms, your brain needs silence to reconstruct itself. And if God is the architect of the human mind, would it not be logical that he would use exactly this mechanism to transform you? The silence you are living is not abandonment. It is the operating room of your transformation. And the surgeon is working. Write the word translated in the comments now. Write it as a declaration of faith, because when you declare out loud, or even in writing, what is happening in the spiritual, you anchor that reality in the physical world. You transform perception into position. And from a position, no one moves you. Now pay close attention, because what I am going to reveal to you now is perhaps the deepest layer of this message, and it is something that almost no one teaches. Most people know Enoch as the man who did not die, but few stop to reflect on what the expression "God took him" means. In the Hebrew language, the verb used is lakash. Lakash does not simply mean to pick up or take away. Lakash carries the idea of taking with intention, with desire, with deliberate purpose. It is the same verb used when a groom takes a bride, when a king takes possession of a territory, when a father takes into his arms the son who was lost. Lakach is an act of reclamation. God did not simply remove Enoch from the world. God reclaimed Enoch. He declared ownership over him. He said, "This one is mine, and his place is no longer here." Do you understand what this means for your life? People can no longer find you in the old places, not because you are lost, but because you have been reclaimed. The owner of your story decided that that address no longer corresponds to your destiny. And when the owner decides, the setting obeys. The doors close not against you, but in favor of what is to come. Relationships cool not because you failed, but because they serve the purpose of that chapter, and the chapter has turned. The opportunities that seem to have dried up have not disappeared. They were redirected to the new address. And the new address is a place where you will operate in a dimension that the old version of you could not even imagine. Think of Moses. Before liberating an entire people, Moses spent 40 years in the desert of Midian. 40 years. A man who was raised in Pharaoh's palace, who had the best education in Egypt, who knew power and luxury, suddenly finds himself tending sheep in the middle of nowhere. Imagine the internal confusion of this man. Imagine Moses waking up every day in the desert, looking at the empty horizon and thinking, "I was someone. I had a name. I had influence. And now I am here, invisible, talking to sheep that do not answer me." But those 40 years were not an error in God's plan. They were God's plan. Every day in that desert was building within Moses a humility that the palace could not forge, a dependence on God that human power could not teach, a patience that only prolonged silence can cultivate. And when the bush burned, when God finally spoke, Moses was ready, not because the desert was pleasant, but because the desert was necessary. And your current desert, this place of silence and invisibility that you are living, has the same purpose. It is not pleasant. I know. It is not comfortable. I know. But it is necessary. It is surgically necessary. Because God is building within you something that the old environments could not sustain. A depth of character that the superficiality of the world rejects. A spiritual integrity that spaces of convenience do not tolerate. An intimacy with the divine that demands solitude, silence, and total surrender. Activate the notification bell now, because in the coming days I will bring a message that will show you the first concrete fruits of this translation, and I can guarantee you, you will not want to be away from the channel when that word is released. I need now to talk about a side effect of this removal that few people discuss, but that may be corroding you inside. When you are removed from a setting, the people who remain in that setting need to create a narrative to explain your absence. And that narrative is almost never favorable to you. They will say that you changed, that you became strange, that you think you are better than others, that you abandoned everyone, that you became another person. And do you know what is most painful? Some of these people will say this with genuine conviction, because from their perspective it is exactly what it seems. They cannot see what is happening behind the scenes of your life. They do not have access to the internal process that God is conducting. All they see is that you vanished, and the easiest explanation is that you are the villain of the story. Data from the Getulio Vargas Foundation on social group dynamics in Brazil show that when a member of a group differentiates themselves, whether through personal growth, change of values, or internal transformation, the group tends to interpret this differentiation as betrayal, not as evolution. Betrayal. It is a collective defense mechanism. If someone grows, those who stayed behind need to justify why they did not grow. And the most comfortable justification is to disqualify the one who left. So they invent flaws. They create distorted versions of the facts. They transform your absence into evidence of character failure. And if you do not understand this mechanism, you may end up believing these narratives. You may end up returning to the old setting burdened with guilt, apologizing for having grown, diminishing your own transformation to fit into a space that is no longer yours. Do not do that. Please do not do that. You do not owe apologies for being translated. You do not need to shrink so that others feel comfortable with the size God is giving you. The eagle does not apologize to the chicken coop when it discovers it can fly. It simply spreads its wings. And the wind that comes from under those wings is not arrogance. It is nature. It is purpose. It is destiny. And here is something that needs to be said with all clarity. The people who were removed from your life are not necessarily bad. Some are good. Some love you genuinely. But love and purpose do not always walk together. Someone can love you deeply and still have no place in the next phase of your journey. This does not diminish the love. It does not erase the story. It simply recognizes that certain vessels were made for certain seasons. And when the season changes, the vessels change as well. The pain you feel at losing these people is legitimate. Honor that pain. But do not confuse it with a sign that you should go back. Longing is the tribute the heart pays to what was beautiful. But purpose is the invitation the spirit makes to what will be greater. Share this video now with someone who is going through this process of removal and has not yet understood what is happening. Someone who is feeling invisible, rejected, out of place. Send this video to that person. Because sometimes the difference between despair and hope is a single message received at the right time. Now I want to tell you about what is on the other side. Because up to here I have explained the process, but the process only makes sense when you see the destination. And the destination that awaits you is not an improved version of the life you had. It is a completely new life, not in the sense that everything will be different externally, although much will be, but in the sense that you will operate from an identity you have never accessed before. There is in developmental psychology a concept that researchers at PUC Rio call emergent identity. It is when, after a prolonged period of deconstruction and internal reconstruction, the person accesses a version of themselves that was latent, dormant, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. This identity is not invented. It was always there. But it needed the fire, the silence, and the removal to come to the surface. It is like those seeds that biologists find buried in the Brazilian cerrado, seeds that only germinate after a fire. The fire that would seem like destruction is, in fact, the trigger for germination. Without the fire, the seed remains eternally dormant. With the fire, it explodes into life. You are that seed. The fire has already passed. And now the germination begins. The identity that is emerging from within you is the identity that God always saw when He looked at your life. Not the version limited by the opinion of others. Not the version suffocated by the fear of disappointing. Not the version that learned to diminish itself to fit into small spaces. The full version. The version that was designed before the foundation of the world, before anyone had the chance to say who you should be. And this identity is accompanied by a peace that defies logic, a peace that does not depend on circumstances. Studies from the Heart Math Institute documented that people who go through prolonged periods of internal transformation, especially when combined with contemplative and faith practices, develop what researchers call sustained cardiac coherence. It is when the heart rhythm stabilizes in a harmonious pattern that influences the entire nervous system, reducing reactivity to stress and increasing the capacity to process complex emotions without being dominated by them. In spiritual language, this is the peace that surpasses all understanding. It is a peace that does not come from without. It comes from within. And whoever possesses it does not need external approval to feel security, because security has already been installed in the deepest place of the being. And it is this version of you that is about to manifest to the world. A version that does not tremble when criticism arrives, that does not crumble when the plan changes, that does not despair when the setting darkens, because this version has already crossed the desert, has already survived the fire, has already learned that God's silence is not absence, it is construction. And whoever knows this in practice, not by theory, but by lived experience, is unshakable. Now I want you to pay attention to something that most people ignore about the story of Enoch. The text of Hebrews in the New Testament adds a detail about Enoch's life that Genesis does not mention. It says that before being translated, Enoch received testimony that he had pleased God. Before, not after. Before the removal, before the elevation, before the visible reward, God had already approved Enoch. The testimony came first, the translation came after. And this changes everything in the way you see your moment. Because you may be looking at your life now and thinking that you need to produce results before deserving divine approval, that you must first prove your value, achieve something visible, show palpable fruits. But God's order is inverse. He approves first. He declares your name first. He calls you good and faithful first. And then, from that approval, comes the manifestation. You are not working to earn God's approval. You already have that approval. What is happening now is simply the setting, adjusting itself to reflect what heaven has already declared about you. I want to close this message with an image that I hope remains engraved in your mind forever. Imagine a painting covered by a dark cloth. The painting is already painted. Every color has already been applied. Every detail has already been finalized. The work is ready, but no one sees it because the cloth is covering it. Now imagine that someone approaches and slowly begins to pull the cloth. First, a corner appears, a fragment of color, a trace of light, and the people around begin to lean forward, trying to see. But the artist knows that the right moment is when the entire cloth falls, not before, because the work deserves to be revealed in its entirety, not in pieces. You are that painting. The work is already ready. God has already finished the internal work. Every color was applied in moments of pain. Every trace was drawn in nights of silence. Every detail was refined in days of invisibility. And now the cloth is being pulled, slowly, with precision, because the artist is in no hurry. He knows that when the world finally sees what he created in you, there will not be enough words to describe the beauty of what was done in secret. The doors that closed are not rejection. They are protection of the work while it dried. The people who left are not losses. They are old frames that do not match the new painting. The silence that enveloped you is not abandonment. It is the artist protecting his creation from the noise of the world until the right time for revelation. And the right time is now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, now. Because God does not wait for your readiness. He declares your readiness. And what he declares no human voice can revoke. Just like Enoch, you are not disappearing. You are being taken. Lakash. Reclaimed with intention, with desire, with deliberate purpose. The old setting no longer has a place for you because the new setting is being inaugurated. And in this setting, your name is not invisible. Your name is revelation. Your name is purpose manifested. Your name is the living proof that God walks with those who dare to walk with him, even when the path is silent, even when the road is deserted, even when the feet ache and no one applauds. Congratulations, you did not get lost. You were found by the only one who knows exactly where you should be, and where he placed you, nothing and no one can remove you. Comment the word translated now and write what this message awakened in you. I read every comment, every testimony, because every word you write down there is a seed that can transform the life of someone who is reading in silence. And in the next video, I will reveal to you what happens in the first days inside the new setting, the practical changes you will begin to perceive when the translation is complete. I guarantee you, you will want to be here.